In Khalid Hosseini's The Kite Runner, Baba tells his son that ultimately there's only one sin, only one, and that is theft. Every other sin is a variation of theft. When you kill a man, you're still alive. You steal his wife's right to a husband, rob his children of a father. When you tell a lie, you steal someone's right to the truth. When you cheat, you steal someone's right to fairness. There is no act more wretched than stealing. It's a powerful quote. He really believes that theft is the one and only sin, with every other sin a variation. When I first read this many, many years ago, I agreed with Baba. I could see his point and I could understand his understanding, his philosophy. However, having grown older, I believe that he is slightly mistaken in one simple way. To commit theft first necessitates a progenitor, and that is the lie to oneself. We lie to ourselves all the time. And don't worry, this will not be an entirely philosophical video and everything. But I lie, you lie, we all lie, and many times we lie to ourselves. And those kind of insidious lies, I think, are the most damaging. However, we are not going to talk about the personal lies that we tell. We're going to talk about collective lies. Because believe it or not, lies can be useful. They can be good. They can actually do way more good than harm. And so let's talk about just a few examples of collective lies and how sometimes they can be good or incredibly terrible. The first case is money. We lie to ourselves about money, right? Like, for example, here is a $50 note. This thing is a lie. It only has value so long as we all agree that to participate in the collective lies. This is a piece of plastic. Ultimately, it has no inherent value in and of itself. It cannot do anything. It cannot be used for anything. It can't even be used to start a fire. It's only valuable in that we all believe and we all choose to believe and sustain and maintain the collective lie for society to work. And so that's money. The second lie that I want to talk about is the kind of top-down philosophy that politicians sometimes use. I know that there is an actual economical term for it, but I didn't look it up before. But it's basically the belief that the best way to raise up poverty is by making the rich richer, or the trickle-down philosophy. Yes, that's what it is, right? Or the trickle-down mentality, whatever. Some variation of that. By making the rich richer, they would then use that money and spend it, and then they will bring up the poor. That doesn't happen, because what actually happens, and again, economists, and there's tons of video out there as to why the trickle-down philosophy doesn't work. But essentially what happens is that the rich will spend money among themselves, right? And so you are going to have a ballooning pool of wealth at the top that hardly ever trickles down in any significant way, all the way down to like the lowest class. So, and let's not forget that a lot of people are also selfish, So you will have a rich person that will be incredibly fortunate to buy a $250,000 couch that they can't even sit on because it's not really meant to be sat on. It's more like a work of art. And yet that same person will go down to a local craftsman that will build something and will try to haggle with them over a cost that might only be $25. And so that is why that particular lie is empirically proven to be false, and yet it still remains a collective lie. It is a lie that is still being told in a community, being told by politicians, being told by, even finance experts, supposedly, because it serves a good minority of people. And that minority being powerful, the impact is widespread. But the most insidious lie I could think of when I was thinking about this video is the lie of the original sin. This is a lie that is proclaimed by the church. They are incredibly reverent of this lie. And in case you've never been to a church or you've never really cared for religious studies, the lie of the original sin basically begins with saying that you are a disappointment. You are born from sin. You are made of sin. Really, if you think about it, you were made through the act of sinning. And so your life will forever and eternally be a sort of apology letter to God, a sort of pilgrimage that you should go on, wherein you should always try to be a little bit more saintly, to rub off a little bit of that sin, but you should forever fail. A little bit like Sisyphus, mountain, or Sisyphus himself, who, no matter how far you push up the boulder of sin, it will eventually roll back and crush you, except it will get bigger because the longer you live, the more sin you will commit. The lie of the original sin, I think, is one of the most insidious, one of the most deadly, one of the most dangerous, because it basically begins by saying that you are not good enough for your own God, right? The being, the deity, the force of the universe that created you shall forever be disappointed by you, and all you can do is ask for forgiveness, because let's face it, you're going to sin. And of course we sin, right? And this lie is so thorough, it's so insidious, it's so well engraved, and it's so well documented that it really covers all avenues. It's not only the things that you do, it's also the things that you think. You take a look at the commandments and it's like, oh, do not covet another man's wife. Well, if you go to the store and you see a fine looking woman, and you just imagine yourself being with her, or imagine yourself dating her, or imagine yourself just in any way, shape, or form being her person or her man, or sleeping together or whatever, well, she could be someone's wife. Now you have coveted someone who you were not meant to. And even if this was simply a passing, fleeting thought, well, there you go, you have sinned. And once you realize how little it takes, how low the barrier to sin is, you realize that you shall forever be mired in sin. And that is the point. The point of the church is to then help you navigate through this sin, except they themselves sin a lot, right? And so you end up with this kind of like concept. And of course, they take the lie of the original sin and they tie it extremely close to sexuality, try to control people's sexuality, how they should do it, how they should think about it, when they should do it, with whom, and everything like that. Really, it's about control. Because the church as an organization, and this happens for many religions, not just the Catholic ones or the Christian ones, is that they are about exerting control over a population. And once you understand that, you understand the purpose of the lie. But again, we are here for gaming. I wanted to just establish that collective lies exist. They can be good, they can be bad, they can be insidious. And in gaming itself, we find ourselves as part of this community. And whenever there is a community, there is a chance for collective lies to occur. And so we're just going to talk about those collective lies and the reason why it's important that we as individuals become aware of those lies, so that hopefully we can start pushing back on some of these narratives that ultimately do not serve us. The first, the biggest, and the most, the most noble sounding lie that I've heard in recent times is gameplay is king. It's almost offensive to people when you tell them that this is a lie, because we are gamers. Gameplay literally is what we do. Like, there is a game, we play it. It is a combination of the words. It is everything that makes gaming different from every other entertainment medium. It's the gameplay. But the lie is that gameplay is king. Like, it stands far above the other things that make a game a game. Gameplay, according to this lie, should be more important than graphics, audio, technical accuracy or technical acumen, by which I mean glitches, bugs, technical performance, things of that sort. It should be more important than the voice actors or the people that participate in the game. It should certainly be more important than the ethics behind the game, how it was created, who created it, for what purpose. So long as the game is good, the game is good. No matter if it may have things that are predatory, like loot boxes or gacha mechanics. Gameplay is king. If the gameplay is good, everything else falls in progressively further away levels of importance below that. That's a lie. And we have ample examples to prove it. Recently, Ubisoft released the Prince of Persia, The Lost Crown. People went up and down giving this game critical acclaim because of its gameplay. It also had nice graphics too, let's be honest. It looks really, really good. It has great audio design. It has this and it has that. And so people now say, okay, gameplay is king. So this game should have sold. But it didn't. And we're going to talk about that in the next segment because it touches on a lie. Another one you can take of in recent years is Returnal. Returnal is a game that the gameplay is truly astounding and incredible. However, again, it didn't sell well. Now, Returnal doesn't look as good graphically as something even like Prince of Persia. And I would imagine that had it looked a lot better, had the graphics been important, then it would have sold better. Had the story been more compelling, it would have sold much better. But again, the lie is gameplay is king. And we can think about example after example after example. You take a look at a game like Rise of the Ronin. Rise of the Ronin is a game that I personally did not want because it didn't look good. I'm the guy. Graphics matter to me. Graphics matter to you. But again, gameplay is king. While it has amazing gameplay, from everything that I saw, even in the trailer, from every person that has given a testimony on this game and how it performs in the actual game, everybody agrees that this game is a great playing game. And yet, it has a soul gangbusters. You take a look at Dragon's Dogma 2, another game with revered gameplay. However, its technical performance, its technical acumen, prevents it from delivering the experience that I think the developers would wish, and so people do not fuck with it as much as you think that they would if gameplay were to be king. Gameplay is king is an insidious lie because it sounds good on the surface without being honest at all about people's actual playing habits. It's it's the equivalent of people that say that, okay, you shouldn't judge a book by its cover. We agree that there is so much truth in that one. That one is far less of an insidious lie. However, sometimes when that is used, it can ignore the fact that people do judge the book by the covers. Like, we have to be honest. You shouldn't do this, but you probably do. So we have to take that into account, and a book needs a nice, attractive cover. It needs a cover that is representative well of the story that you will see and everything like that. And it is not petty, and it is not somehow immature to judge a book by its cover. It's literally the first thing that you see. Now, of course, there are many tangents to this in the dating world and everything like that. Like, attractiveness matters. And you take a look at graphics, and what I will tell you is that for me, the three top pillars are gameplay, graphics, and story. But those three sit on the same plane. And then there are simply planes below that, things like voice acting, things like side quests, things like technical performance. They just sit on a disc below that one. And then further and further, there are more and more planes where more and more things may sit. But at the very top, gameplay is not king. Graphics, story, and gameplay are all equally important for the most part. In general, if you take a look at the collective body of games, let's say you take the look at the top 100 games that have sold on console primarily over the last 10 years, let's say, what you will find is that at the very top, those are games where the gameplay, the graphics, and the story kind of sat evenly with each other. Some games, gameplay will be much more of a focus. Some games, graphics will be much more of a pull. But then when you average things out, you find that they are about all equally as important. That's the truth. The next slide that we're going to talk about is gamers want variety. And so for this one, we'll pick back up with Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown. When Prince of Persia came around, I thought this is a great playing game. It's a great graphics game, looking game. It's a great game overall that no one's gonna want. People don't want variety in games. They don't. They don't want variety. Now, listen, this does not mean that they don't want games that sometimes offer them something that they haven't seen before or they haven't seen in a while, of course. But as a collective body, when you look at our spending habits, okay, not you individually, but just us, the gaming body as a collective, you realize that what sells are games that have great graphics, have great gameplay, have a great story. The AAA games, you know, I feel like each of those A should stand for those gameplay, graphics, and story. Um, or they are sequels to games from yesteryear, you know, usually sequels that themselves benefit from the learned knowledge that these developers went through. You will find very rarely that there will be a breakout success that is somehow a huge variety, hugely divergent from what the other kind of like core body of games are. You know, it's really hard to imagine. Like again, if you were to imagine, let's say the top 25 games in the last 10 years, how many of them will look a little bit like The Witcher 3 and Call of Duty, you know, kind of like staple franchises? You know, how many of them will look a little bit like Breath of the Wild, you know, kind of having that open world kind of thing? But then how many of them are going to look like Prince of Persia, Hollow Knight, Hades, you know, side scrollers and isometric games? Gamers do not want variety. And yet they proclaim that they want variety so often that it becomes a collective lie. And not only do they proclaim that they want variety, but now they are deriding the games that are most successful now, saying that those games are lazy, they are, you know, what do they call it? They're regurgitations of concepts that we've seen over and over again. And yet Call of Duty sells like one of the best games every year. And yet Grand Theft Auto 5 has been here for three whole generations as a top selling game in each of those generations: PS3, PS4, PS5. If they took Grand Theft Auto 5, and I mean 5, not 6, if they took Grand Theft Auto 5 to the PlayStation 6, even with Grand Theft Auto 6 out, Grand Theft Auto 5 itself will still be a hugely popular game in the next generation, even though it would have had the sequel. Because some people would just be like, hey, just give me more of Grand Theft Auto 5. I love this world, I love that game. So, the dichotomy between what the collective gaming body says, especially in places like Twitter and social media, versus what they buy, is so disparate as to be frankly disgusting. You take a look at people say, oh, we don't want the Sony template, semi-open world or open world, third person, you know, over the shoulder camera, or you know, sad that simulator or post-apocalyptic, you know, blah blah blah, blah blah blah. And yet Horizon Zero Dawn, the first one, even no sequel required, sold 24 million copies. 24 million copies. Those are almost Zelda numbers, and Zelda has had like 30 plus years, you know, to like establish itself in the gaming mindset, to prove its worth. But you guys gave the first shot out the gate 24 million copies from a developer that frankly was making niche games before. Killzone was a high profile niche game. It wasn't for everyone. Most people didn't play Killzone. I didn't play Killzone. But Horizon Zero Dawn, there we were. Now we know that the Horizon franchise has apparently sold 35 million copies between the first and the second game, which is again a tremendous amount of sales for a franchise that only has two games, at least two main platform games. Now we are having, you know, derivations of that. Now we have, you know, Horizon Call of the Mountain, and we're going to get Lego Horizon. So I suppose the pie will get bigger. Ghost of Tsushima, I think, sold 8 million copies. Again, out of the gate. Again, from a developer that was on people's radar, but it wasn't, it didn't have like a huge level of acclaim. It wasn't Bungie. It wasn't FromSoft as they are now. But 8 million copies. So we find ourselves at this crossroad where everyone tells you the night before that they are going to climb the mountain. They're going to climb Everest themselves. No Sherpa, no guide, just themselves, their willpower, their wits, their tenacity, and their grit. And on the other side, there are elevators and helicopters. But everyone tells you, I'm going to go. I'm going to do the hard thing. I'm going to play these games that are divergent from what I normally get. I'm going to play the Hollow Knights. I'm going to play Child of Light. I'm going to play Journey. I'm going to play Flower. I'm going to play Cult of the Lamb. That's the path. And the other side, Fortnite, Call of Duty, FIFA, Madden, NBA 2K. We're tired of these games. They're too easy. They're derivative. They barely change anything in a year. Look at sports game, the entire January is ruined. The night before, they tell you they're gonna go that way. They're gonna go for the indies, the double A's, the creative, the variety, the innovative games. And the morning after, everyone's on those helicopters. Everyone paid the premium to get to the top of the mountain as quickly, as comfortably as possible. No one wants to do it the hard way. No one wants to do the hard yard. They want to get to the top of Mount Everest. They want to land. They want to run out there first. They wanted the Instagram shot. And then they want to fuck off back to the elevator or the helicopters if they can afford it. And they want to just get an easy ride down. And that's the truth. That is the insidious lie that we have. Gamers don't want variety. What they want are sequels or derivative games with a gimmick. Give me Horizon Zero Dawn, but add the glider from Breath of the Wild, Forbidden West. Give me The Witcher 2, but add polish and refinement, The Witcher 3. Give me Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, but add 2 white guys for some reason, Grand Theft Auto 5. Give me this thing that I know, but then change this one aspect so I can pretend it's brand new. There you go. And that is what sells. And listen, let's not pretend that we feel sad when these games don't succeed. I've said it many times before. No one wanted Pentiment. No one wanted Pentiment. No one wanted Hi-Fi Rush. No one wanted all of these games that all of these media personalities and podcasters are so devastated that they're not going to get a sequel for. Really? Did you want that? You and who? 12 other people. That's all. That's all of you. Let's just tell the truth. When it comes to success, people will literally take Breath of the Wild, a hugely amazing, beautiful game, and then they will add scantily clad anime characters, and they'll call that Genshin Impact. And Genshin Impact is going to make way more money than Breath of the Wild ever did. And that's the world we live in. And that's the truth. The next lie that we tell ourselves is that watching streamers makes you a gamer. Now, this is a lie that is fairly recent, but it had a huge supporter, a huge proponent or propeller of this lie in Microsoft. Microsoft said that whether you play a game, you watch a game, or whatever difficulty, blah, 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 you're a gamer. Listen, I'm not here to have the whole game difficulty conversation. At the end of the day, it's your piece of entertainment. And if you believe that playing it on story mode is a way that you want to experience that game for maximum enjoyment, have at it. You have my blessings. I'm not going to make any snide commentary about it. Sometimes I like playing a game on an easy difficulty because I'm not looking to be to have the most amount of challenge I can get out of that game. I still have never beat a Last of Us game on like crushing difficulty or grounded mode, right? It's fine. But when it comes to watching the game, that doesn't make you a gamer. Listen, I watch real estate shows all of the time. It doesn't make me a realtor. I watch interior design videos all of the time. And while I think I will be good as an interior designer, in and of itself, that does not make me an interior designer. I watch videos about cars. It doesn't make me a car engineer, an automotive engineer, or a car designer, or even like an interior like fitter. Like I doesn't make me a car mechanic. Watching a game doesn't make you a gamer. Watching a game, even when you are already a gamer, doesn't mean you've played the game. That is a lie that we are now being told. But the thing about this lie, and the thing that makes it insidious, is that streaming itself is insidious. I was talking about this on Podworks podcast the other day. But why is it that people are allowed to stream the entirety of a game, specifically focused on single player games? For multiplayer games, where there's always an element of randomness, where it's basically just the same thing being repeated while you're playing the same map over and over again, you have the same objectives over and over again. Most of the time, there's no story component, so there's no end. It is, evergreen in that sense. I believe for multiplayer games, it makes perfect sense for the author of the game, the publisher of the game, and the gamer to want to play and stream as much of it as possible. No problem when it comes to multiplayer, especially online games, especially like battle arenas and everything, like League of Legends being streamed. I'm sure that's very enjoyable. I think they have a sports league. It is what it is. But when it comes to single player games, it's become a huge problem because a lot of these games that are actually different, you take a look at Disco Elysium. A lot of these games that actually offer variety, they suffer from having streamers broadcast all of their content to the world. You could have a stream where a top streamer is literally broadcasting this game to millions of people. And then those people, because they have experienced all of the content of the game, do not feel compelled to go out there and buy the game. And the thing that is like when people say like, oh, well, it's my game, I can stream it. No, it's not. It doesn't belong to you. It's not. You don't own that game. If anyone is allowed to stream it, it should be an official stream from the studio on their official channel. They own the game. You don't own that game. You only have a license to the game. And we can restrict that license however we want because we do for everything else. If I go out and I buy The Matrix in 4K Blu-ray, I can't just set a camera, have myself somewhere in the frame, and then stream the entire movie for people to watch. If I subscribe to Netflix, I cannot just stream the entire show. If I get a book, I cannot just read on stream the entire book. Even though I've bought it, it's a physical copy. No one can come and take the book from me, but it's not my intellectual property. I cannot just redistribute it, resell it, or monetize its content ad nauseum without any kind of pushback. And it is strange to me that companies that are incredibly litigious in many other senses have somehow allowed single player games to be streamed in their entirety by any streamer. Nintendo quickly called onto this. I think Nintendo has just always been very anti, people taking their intellectual property and using it in any way that they didn't directly approve. Like, if you want to make a Nintendo stream, I feel like you need to literally talk to the CEO and be like, hey, dude, can I do it? And he'll have to literally sign it in person in front of you and all of his other lawyers for them to be like, okay, I guess we'll let this one slide, but you be careful. But it is insidious because, again, it damages the sales of those particular properties, especially the ones that need it. I think that this should be a medium approach. As far as single player games are concerned, I believe you should never be allowed as a blanket slate to stream more than 30% of the content. For some games, this might be 1 or 2 hours. For some games, it might be up to 30 hours because they are just that long. However, I think we should leave it to the publisher to choose how much of the game you are allowed to stream. You take a look at a game like Elden Ring, they could probably let you stream the first 30 hours of it without any issues because they would just be like, yeah. Or they could mark areas of the map that you're allowed to stream and areas that you're not allowed to stream, whatever. I think that'd be more complicated, but it is what it is. When you take a look at a game like The Last of Us, which is separated into chapters, and many other games like it, I believe that if a game like that has, let's say, 12 chapters, you should not be able to stream past chapter 4. Because again, as a streamer, you can be a valuable asset to getting eyes on the game. But if you reveal everything that there is about the game, people will not buy it. And so it lessens the amount of money pushing into the single player side. And let's face it, when we talk about gaming dying, we're mostly talking about single player and co-op games. We are talking about these games because the live service games are all doing fine. The annualized sports games that we've been, crapping on about. I remember the first time that I was like, I can't buy another FIFA was 2011. That was when I was like, nah, I can't buy another FIFA, man. I'm not buying another FIFA game. I was done. That was 13 years ago. Now they've got FIFA 25. So that's like 14 years ago now, or 14 titles ago. People are still buying it. In fact, more people are buying it now and spending money on it now than they've ever done in the past. They ever done when I was done. So that's the situation we find ourselves in. I believe that streaming has been detrimental to single player games. And this is across the board. I don't believe that you streaming the entirety of a single player game, especially one that has a strong narrative focus, is a particularly good thing for that game. Because what people will do is that they will watch you and then they will not buy the game. Now, some pushback that I get is that people say, oh, they are here to experience the streamer. They are not there for the game. They are there for the personality and the flavor and the impact that the streamer brings. So put him in the kitchen and watch him cook. Put him on the toilet and watch him be funny. Put him in front of a couch drinking whiskey. No, they are there for the game also. If that streamer wasn't streaming games, he wouldn't be having the audience that he has because these people are actually interested, potential customers. But when he reveals everything, he spoils everything, people go and then they think they have played the game when really they haven't. And then you have companies like Microsoft putting out statements that says, hey, indeed, you are a gamer. That's silly, that's detrimental, that's insidious. Watching a streamer is not playing the game. And streaming, as far as single players games go, has become tremendously dangerous, especially for the smaller scale titles, for the smaller games that need every potential interested buyer to actually truly consider purchasing the product. That is the truth. The next line we're going to talk about is physical is dead. I have an American audience, according to the Google Analytics and everything. American and European, I think, is the most audience. And I listen primarily to podcasters and gamers that are based in America. Those are the ones that I follow on Twitter. Those are the ones that I listen to on YouTube and everything like that. And this lie just keeps being repeated. And it's one of the most infuriating. And it's infuriating because it pretends that the world revolves really around one culture, one set of living standards, one, facet of desirability. In America, digital has overtaken physical game purchases, I think, for at least the last 4 years. Definitely in this generation. However, in the rest of the world, which is, believe it or not, much bigger than America, physical game sales are incredibly important. I think I wish I had the facts on hand, but again, I didn't want to turn this one into a whole research project. But I think that in places like Europe itself, physical was still selling 82% compared to digital. Because there are many other conditions in the world that would make someone prefer physical still, despite the convenience that digital can offer. And so you hear things like, oh, this will be the last consoles to have physical media. No, no, they won't be. No, they will not be. They will not be the last consoles to have physical media. Are you stupid? Are you dumb? Or are you stupid? Which one which one would you pick? Which one would you like? Because there's only those two options. Or maybe your view of the world is simply myopic. Maybe your view of the world is basically goes as far as you and your belly button. Because while it is perfectly fine for you to prefer digital, I have no issue with that. Understand that the rest of the world has some real challenges that physical media truly solves. Physical media is easier to share around. Physical media can reduce the amount of download that you have. At least assuming that the actual disc is on so the actual game is on the disc, which for a lot of PlayStation titles and PlayStation ecosystem games, they happen to have the game on the disc. There are very few games that are on the PlayStation platform that release kind of like these phantom keys, where there is only basically an activation key on the disc and then the rest has to be downloaded. Xbox is a little bit more guilty of that sin, but it's okay. They are not relevant to the conversation. The internet infrastructure around the globe is, for the most part, incredibly challenging or incredibly presents itself as an obstacle to the acceptance or to the assimilation of digital gaming. It is okay. Games nowadays can go up to 200 gigs. Be able to have something from the store that can save you sometimes days worth of downloads. It matters. In my home country, where people are still being charged by the gig a significant amount of money, it would be completely untenable to think that digital distribution will take hold there. Not for another 20 years, I don't think. And that there is a testimony to so many things that are wrong in that part of the world, way beyond just technical infrastructure. But that is the reality. Physical games matter. Not only that, but people have all over the world extensive physical libraries. And if you were to create a console that has no option for a disk drive or an attachment, again, I believe the next PlayStation console will come as a digital standard with a physical add-on. That is the perfect setup. Even to this day, if you really want it, you can buy an external disk reader for your PC. It is the perfect, it is a perfect compromise, but it doesn't have to be a compromise because to the player who values the digital library and the convenience of having everything digital, they can simply choose that. And for the person that's like, no, physical is important to me, they can have the add-on. And the way that Sony did it this generation with the PlayStation 5 Slim and now the PlayStation 5 Pro, where instead of looking like an external aftermarket attachment to the console, it really does look like, hey, this thing was always this way. Now, of course, design-wise, the PlayStation 5 Slim or digital is better looking. It has a much better looking silhouette and everything like that. However, the physical option remains, and once it is attached, it looks like an integrated part of the design. So I believe the PlayStation 6 will do the exact same thing. There will be the standard console plus the optional disc attachment, and once you attach it, it will look like it always belonged there. That is a fair compromise to make, and it is a great option. Those who do not need the physical attachment point and disc reader, they can just ignore it. And if ever there is a problem with your disc reader, another advantage of this is that you can just, replace that part. If you damage your PlayStation in transit and then you realize that the laser is misaligned and it cannot risk your disc anymore, you no longer have to sell the entire console. You can either send just a part for warranty replacement, or you could just buy yourself a new part at a much lower fee, at a much quicker turnaround point. That is the truth. The truth is physical isn't dead. Physical matters to people. And when you take a look at a lot of games that have come out and they have underperformed, specifically, let's talk about Alan Wake 2. A lot of the reason that a lot of people say that they didn't buy that game is because they didn't have physical media when it first launched. I still believe that that is a mistake. I believe that outside of indie games, we may simply not have the budget or may simply not see the sales potential that will make them commit to a physical release. I believe that every other game needs to really prioritize physical media. There is also something visible about physical objects in the real world, in the 3D world that we live, well, technically 4D if you include time or whatever. In the world that we live in, something that is physical simply calls more presence to itself than something that is digital. And again, we don't have to be myopic. We don't have to talk solely about gaming. They still release Blu-ray discs in the age of streaming, in the age of Disney Plus and Hulu and Max and this and that and Netflix and blah. We still have physical media. They still have physical books. Ebooks have been around, but physical books dominate dominate the book market. And that is for many reasons that are similar to gaming. But the point is, when you walk into a bookstore or when you walk into a library or when you go to like a little library, have you guys seen those little free libraries where you just take a book and leave a book? There is something magical about the experience. There's something human about that experience. There's something tangible and tactile and comforting and intimate about the experience of a physical object that gives you joy. You can point to it, you can share it, you can see it, you can touch it, you can feel it. It's stronger with books for me personally, but it does exist with games. The truth is, physical will never die because humanity will always appreciate the real, the attainable, and the tactile over the illusion that is digital media and digital ownership. That is the truth. The next slide we're going to talk about is support the devs. This is a lie that is, again, hard for people to accept because it sounds right. There's a nobility to it, right? To support the devs means that if you see a game that you're interested in, go ahead and make the sacrifice and support the devs. I don't think that I have an issue with the sentiment behind it. I think I have an issue with the phrasing. And phrasing is important. When you take a look at the phrase, support the devs, my issue is that it makes it seem as if it was somehow your duty as a customer to provide financial recompense to a company or a group of individuals or a studio or a single developer for having put out a product. But that is not a business relationship. And this is what we are. We are in a business relationship. I've said it many times before and I repeat it again. A company is allowed to charge you whatever they want for their product, and you as a potential customer are allowed to pay whatever you find acceptable. That is the nature of our relationship. This is transactional. It is not emotional. At the point of purchase, you may have emotions about the product and everything like that, but you should feel no duty to support the developers. And this has extended now into this whole theater, this virtue signaling that people put around whenever developers are fired or whenever there are mass layoffs. A lot of people will cry to the high heavens about how tragic it is, how tremendous, how but will you ever reach out to even a single developer and say like, hey, how can I help you? Can I offer you a change in career? Can I offer you a job that I know of? Is there a studio that I know of that is like looking for someone just like you? I've already made the research. Some of you, I'm sure, will just like post random generic job links, but that's very low effort for the amount of virtue signaling and everything else that people do. People do not care in a real way. So support the devs. It implies a measure of care that I think should not be there. These are business transactions. Another thing about supporting the devs is that people sometimes extend it to the point where you should support the developer simply because they've made the game. You take a look at a game like Metaphor Re Fantasia, which I think is a tremendously ugly game. And people will tell you to support the devs simply because, well, you want more games like that. Well, according to me, not you, not the collective, not the Metacritic reviews, just me, they've made a bad product. It's ugly. I don't like ugly games. That's it. I think the gameplay is fine. Actually, I have a lot of problems with the gameplay, but those problems are so far like removed from just the ugliness of the game that it's whatever. It's an ugly, technically lazy game. The technical acumen of the game is far below par. In fact, it doesn't do itself justice because when you take a look at the characters, when you take a look at the story, when you take a look at even the gameplay mechanics from a raw, like turn by turn game kind of perspective, those are great to excellent. In some ways, it's a masterpiece. In some ways. But then the technical acumen of the game is so far below par. You take a look at the art direction and it is absolutely stunning. You take a look at the art style and it is refreshing. But then you take a look at the products that those things have coalesced into and it is just ugly as sin. And so people would then say, oh, support the devs. Why? Do I owe them? Do I know them? Are they my children? Are they my brothers and sisters? Are they my partners? Do I have a personal relationship or connection to them? Why should I support them if they put out a product I wasn't interested in? Same thing with Prince of Persia The Lost Crown. Oh, support the devs. Why? Because their game exists? I'm not interested in it. There are plenty of products in the world that I'm not interested in, from things that are truly remarkable. You take a look at some watches, they are works of art, engineering marvels. You take a look at some textiles, and they are things that literally give you hope in humanity. Because if someone could put together something so intricate, so beautiful, so time and labor intensive, such a testament of their heart and their passion for something, knowing that they might only make 5 or 6 of these pieces in their entire lifetime, and then death, they are dead. This is it. This is their life's work. I can see those things. I can respect those things. I can appreciate those things. But I won't support those things because they are not products that I want. You take a look at some cars, whether they are ultra luxurious, whether they're ultra fast, or whether they're just so goddamn practical. And I still don't want them. Should I support Ford for putting out a practical SUV or a ute that will be a pickup, like a pickup truck but with a cover? It's so, like, can we just talk about it very quickly? Guys, Americans, why don't you guys have utes? It's like a pickup truck, yeah, but there's a cover on top. It makes so much sense. It's lockable too. Whatever. It's okay. It's fine. You can remove it. Obviously, you can just use it as a regular ass pickup truck if you want to. But it's like, it's so goddamn practical. But I don't like utes. I don't want to drive a ute. Nah, would I like? If I happen to drive a ute, would I kill myself? No. It's a good practical car. But I don't want to own a ute. Should I support a company simply for making a ute? No. So we find ourselves in this lie where you should support the devs simply because the product happens to exist or the studio happens to be open. And I disagree with that. If you're not interested in a product, don't buy into it. Don't support it. Don't be there. If you are interested in a product, buy it, because that's what you're doing. When you go to Kmart and you buy their I don't know, their stool or their homeware or their home decor or the textiles or the fabrics or the clothing, you are buying that product. You're not supporting Kmart. Kmart isn't your pal running for election. You are buying that product. This is a business transaction. When you go to BMW and you get yourself that car you've been wanting for the last 3 years, you are buying that car. You're not supporting the German automotive industry. Now, your money eventually supports them, but you yourself are making a purchase. That's what you are. You are a customer or a client, and you are buying a product. That's it. We need to get away from this fake sentimentality. Jesus Christ, can you believe that? Sentimental. Now that's killing me. That word literally just slapped me across the face, and it was like, you're not going to be able to say me right. But sentimentality, sentiment. It's, you get what I mean. Oh man, that gave me up. Anyways, don't support the devs, buy products. And then if that product is bought by enough people, you're probably going to get a sequel, or you're probably going to get money that comes back, or something like that. And then you're going to get something else, another project from that particular studio or particular dev team, or whatever it is. But do not be guilted, into like, oh, you didn't support this game. Yeah, it's not my job. The family of the developers should support the game, because it's something that is a piece of art that their person made. But unless I have a personal connection to the people that behind the game, it's not support. It's simply purchase. Okay. The next insidious lie we're going to talk about is DEI and wokeness. This one feels exhausting, because it pretends to be something that it is not. It pretends to be a care for the art form of gaming, when in reality it is a grift. It is an opportunity for hate merchants to peddle their wares, to peddle their misogyny, to peddle their misandry, to peddle their racism, to peddle their xenophobism. The xenophobia, that's the word. See how that one didn't slam me across the face, right? It is an opportunity for them to peddle these ugly aspects that are inside themselves and make them echo and generate amongst others. At the end of the day, every art form is served better by having a diversity of voices. There are moments when a game might lean so far into a particular theme or a particular topic or a particular conversation or a particular worldview that you find yourself repulsed by it, simply because you feel like you are being beaten over the head. However, that is a very personal reaction, first of all, and that is not a right. That does not impart upon you the right to want to stop the creators from speaking their voice and speaking their mind. I think about Concord. When I think about Concord, I remember that there was one character who appeared to be female, at least, right? And when I looked into her backstory, this is Bass, by the way, she was the knife wielder. She turned out to be transgender. I had an issue with that. Not because I have an issue with transgender people being in games, but because for her particular backstory, the fact that she was transgender just didn't really add anything other than virtue signaling to me. Because essentially, here's how it went. Bass was born a biological male and born to an empire where only the males could ever be at the head. She was born, I guess, within heaps of cousins and like grandchildren and everything. We were a whole cohort of like 18 other people or something. And they all wanted the top spot. They all decided that, hey, you know what? We are going to be the ones that eventually inherit like the CEO position. Cool. Family, sibling rivalry. So far, so good. So then she decided that, hey, instead of like going to like business schools and doing this and trying to impress that, she was going to learn the whole business from the bottom up. She did everything, all of the jobs that the people want to do, from cleaning toilets to fixing parts to talking to mechanics to sending labels and understanding shipping containers and regulations. Throughout her entire teenage life, she went from every job in every position, doing everything that there was to do. She knew people on a personal basis. And the grandfather, okay, the one that will eventually decide who gets the top spot, because he was the one sitting in it right now, who gets the throne, was more impressed by her than anyone else. But remember that she was male. At some point, she undergoes surgery and becomes female, right? There is the transgender nature. And now the grandfather is like, yeah, no, this position is only for men. Now, here's my issue with the story. The story would have worked just as well if she was just born a female in the first place. You haven't told me anything about what it is like to go through a transgender process. You haven't told me anything about like the what is it? The tension that she felt, like, oh, she was born in a body that didn't feel herself. You haven't told me anything about the transgender experience of why people do it. You haven't solved anything. You haven't even talked about anything. Your story never touches on like, oh, she was struggling so much, always being a man, but always feeling like a woman. Never ever once did you touch on it until you were like, oh, she had surgery. Like, you literally just made it look like a flip of a switch, and then, oh, look, now it's an issue. No. It would have been much better for the character to just be born a female and to always have that bias, always have that knowledge that no matter how good she is, she will never inherit the top spot because she's a girl. So even though she deserves it, she won't get it. But no, you just made her transgender because you wanted to tick a box. That's virtue signaling. I think that there is an example of the game not having the space, not being the right medium, not being the right type of game to tell such an intimate story, to tell a story that probably does deserve to be told, but you don't have the time to tell it. It's not an entire game based on this character. We don't get to see them go through the trials and prejudices and the prejudice that she might experience after. None of that is covered because this is just a text box. At the end of the day, you just wanted to have a tick that says she's transgender, and then you had the little box that said how she became transgender and blah blah blah. But you haven't told any emotional reality. You haven't served the audience that you're trying to serve. You haven't convinced me as a person to care more about transgender people. You haven't done anything. And so it feels fake. It feels thinly veiled. Now you could say like, hey, eventually, if the game had been more successful, there would have been expanding storylines and everything like that would have explained this and that, but it wasn't. And so it doesn't get that time. That for me was an example where I was like, yeah, why did you include this if you didn't have the time to do it justice? You shouldn't be trying to make something happen when you don't have that time. And it's the same issue that I often have with like white depiction of slavery. And how, oh, there are so many slaves, and oh, how tragic slavery was. Wasn't it so bad for black people? But hey, here is the exemplary slave, and he's a pianist, or he's this and he's that, and he's the hero. The problem being that everybody else is still a slave. And you make him seem like his ingenuity took him out of slavery, and that's why he deserves his freedom, like it was something to be earned through his academics or through his talent or through his ability to like push back against the system. But freedom is inherently human. It's not something that people have to deserve or work up to or like earn out of people. People did not earn slavery. Like, it still ignores the actual issue. The issue behind slavery is that it is an atrocity. People shouldn't have to fight for their freedom. They should simply have their freedom. That's why it's a human right that we do not be born as slaves, or we do not become slaves through the effort of other people and then have to like work our way out of it. That is my issue with those types of movies and those type of media, because I think that they create this kind of like hero character who eventually gets to like have the happy ending because he worked for it. But his happy ending is just everybody else's average. Because every other white person in the movie is just free. His happy ending is just that he gets to their place. But they didn't have to work for freedom. They didn't have to earn their way out of a lifetime of slavery. They didn't have to see their child or their wife or their mother or the daughter or the sister get beaten. And when these things are based on real stories, what do you think happened to all of the family he left behind? Do you think he was able to like walk back into that slave plantation and be like, yeah, oh, I became free, so can I get my people now? And even if he was able to get out his family, what about every other family that was just as deserving of freedom as he was? You see, we have to be careful when we tell these kind of stories, because many times stories are more painful than the medium would allow for them to be told. We have to be careful that we tell stories that can fit within the medium that we are in. This is true for gaming, it's true for books, it's true for pretty much everything, because entire lives being novelized, with a beginning, middle, and end, that in itself already is a reduction of the human experience. So we have to treat them with care and respect. I personally, me, Emmanuel, I am not that affected by gender stories, whether people have some kind of like gender dysmorphia, or they feel like, oh, I don't belong in a white body, or this or that. It's not that important to me. As a human topic, I'm glad that there are many people talking about it. I would never stand in front of someone being like, hey, you shouldn't talk about this. Please go ahead and do what you believe is right for you and people that feel the same way as you. I care deeply about racial issues. That is the thing. And the thing is, I can't focus on everything, guys. Like, people want you to somehow virtue signal that, oh my God, you care about all of these social things. No, I don't have the time to. I don't have the energy. I care deeply about racial issues and racial tensions and things like xenophobia, and I care deeply about misogyny, and be able to like prop up women to the point where I feel that my sister will have a world that respects her, that cherishes her, that honors her, that uplifts her. Because as a woman, she shouldn't be held down. I believe that our role as men is to bring people up to our level who may not have been there, primarily the other sex, and be like, hey, I want you to know that you can achieve just as much as me. In fact, go ahead and achieve more than me. Because if you're more deserving of a financial reward or an academic reward or public recognition or any award or anything like that, I want you to feel just as entitled to it, just as deserving of it as any other man would. I truly believe that's it. It's not about placing women above us so that we become the new second class. It is about leveling the playing field so that we all feel like we can all work together and we can all progress towards the future. That's what I believe. So between my care for, I guess, gender relationships, I suppose, and racial equality, I have very little time left to care about like polar bears dying. I'm sorry. But the good thing is that I trust in our community to have enough people looking at that issue. I don't expect every person on earth to care about racial relations or racial tensions or xenophobia or misogyny or anything like that. I don't. If your thing is that you really, really care about ecology and deforestation and, just like the damage that we are doing to the planet and the continent and the conditions in which our children will be living from an ecological perspective in the future, great. I'm glad there is someone like you that cares about that. And guess what? You might care about 1, 2, 3, 4 issues, and that's it. That's your bag. That's full. I don't expect you to care about 77. There's many times where people are like, oh my God, there's a war over there. There's a war over there. What do you think about that? What do you think about this? I don't. I try not to think about it, because if I take my eyes and I look at every single issue that there is potentially facing humanity, the billions of issues that we have to deal with, I can't make any progress on any one of them. if we are also distracted by every single branch, every single leaf in the tree, then we can't actually get to the root of the issue. Okay? And we have to look at the root. Enough of us have to look at each individual root, and we have to kind of split ourselves, or at least allow that we would naturally split ourselves and be like, okay, there will be X amount of people that will care about racial tensions and racial issues. There will be Y amount of people that will care about ecological impacts and global warming and everything like that. There will be Z amount of people that will care about things like LGBTQI and what is it? Like transgender and everything like that. There will be that amount of people too. And all of these issues are equally as important. As humanity, as a collective, we all have to solve these issues. There will be people that care about our extinction potential on this planet. Like, we are literally just one bad asteroid away from all dying a horrible, colossal death. There should be people that look at that. But that can't be everyone, and that can't be everyone all at once. And as part of your life, you are going to care about certain issues at different parts of your life. And maybe your care is going to be a little bit less. And all of that should be reflected in our games. There is space enough to have black people in games. There's space enough to have transgender people in games. There's space enough to tell stories about people that don't look like us, people that don't think like us, people that don't act like us. You take a look at Islamophobia. There's a lot of that in media. There's a lot of that in games even. How many times has the bad guy that you're shooting at in Call of Duty worn some kind of hijab or worn some kind of like traditionally Muslim or Islamic attire or symbol? How many times, have you gone to a place like Afghanistan or the Middle East somewhere and you fired upon people that dress in a particular way? How much damage does that do? Could there be stories that are from the other perspective? Not necessarily that you go and you travel to the United States and you shoot people there. No. But more like, can there be stories that tell of that place, of their story, of what matters to them, of their culture, in a way that makes you respectful of the humans? Because while we can shoot at pixels and ultimately understand that those are just pixels, we need to also understand that representation matters. It's good to see positive role models because that's ultimately what we all want. Whether a child is born in Manhattan or Afghanistan or Australia or South Sudan, we want to show them enough positive role models in every piece of media that they might want to partake in, or in every, at least, medium that they might want to partake in, so that they believe that they themselves have inherent goodness, inherent potential to help the world, inherent ability to shape this world into something that is just slightly better than the way they found it before. All of us have the ability to pick up a broom and make the place just a little bit tidier. So we must positively reinforce people as well. When we talk about DEI and wokeness nowadays, unfortunately, both of these terms have been corrupted and co-opted by people who simply use them to say, I disagree with this. I disagree with this worldview. I disagree with this inclusivity. I disagree with the notion that people that don't look like me, people that don't think like me, are just as deserving of happiness in the real world. And that does all of us a disservice. And you take a look at a word like work, which used to be very targeted, very specific to an awareness of the racial history that especially happened in America and Europe with regards to the black community and the people of colors and the peoples of color, I should say, and versus those who often put themselves as became adversaries and enemies to us unprovoked, the European colonizers and everything like that. It was a specific term, or this is spoke to a specific reality, a specific set of issues that should be highlighted. And now it is simply anything that a white person disagrees with. It's such a lie. It's so insidious, and yet grifters use it on social media all of the time, and it bleeds into other areas of our life, or perhaps they have bled from other areas of the collective mindset, and they've now come into gaming, where now every single thing that happens to have a non-white person or even just a person who doesn't necessarily appeal to, like, I guess, traditional European colonizer standards of beauty. But really, it's really situational. There are many people who would appear and who will adhere to those standards of beauty, but maybe because, oh, they happen to be gay, now it's work. Work had nothing to do with gayness or sexuality. It had nothing to do with that, you know. Or it's DEI because the voice actor has personal beliefs, even though those do not necessarily translate to her character. It's disgusting. And we are allowing these people to have a seat at the table, even though they are truly the monsters of this world. They are truly bringing us back to the dark ages with more ease than they ever had before, because social media, the algorithms are designed to amplify negativity because negativity gets more clicks. DEI and wokeness are the words that people use as a catch-all for everything that makes them feel fragile on the inside. And the truth is that the people that use these words, the way that they are now being used, are fragile. They are afraid. They are afraid of something that they themselves may not even know, because really there's very little to be afraid of. But that's what it is. And that is the truth. Finally, the last one that we talk about, bringing it much more into gaming, is subscription gaming is the future. Now, this is a lie that once again Microsoft has been one of the biggest proponents of. Subscription gaming cannot work in the same way that Netflix does for everything else, simply because it doesn't work for books. When you take a look at novels, there have been subscription services for novels. I hope you know that, for ebooks. Amazon has Kindle Unlimited. Other people have their own versions of it. There have even been more, I guess you would say, how do we put it? There have been more, I want to say, tactile ways of doing subscription services. But I guess what I'm trying to say is that there are programs where you can basically borrow a book and then return it as part of your subscription, and again, it will give you access to books that are recently released and everything like that, It's very similar to like a library, except it's, I guess you first you pay for it, of course, and second, it has, more books for you to choose and everything like that. So it's very similar like that. But it doesn't work for books because books require very similar things that movies don't require. Listen, on a game, if you do not move your character forward for the most part, right? Let's just take a nice adventure game. Nothing happens. You do not experience more of the story unless you are actively involved in making the story happen, seeing the story unfold. In books, nothing happens unless you turn the page. Yes, all of the content is there, just like it is in games, but unless you actively read the story, nothing happens. That is not the same with movies. With a movie or a video, it is a piece of theater that is played irrespective of your attention. If you start a 1 hour movie and you sleep all the way through it for an hour, you're going to find yourself at the end. And so consuming media like movies, videos, and that type of media is a lot more passive than it is active. Now, of course, it can be active. You can involve yourself and everything like that. But your attention is not required. And in games and in books, it is required. For that reason alone, books and games will never adhere to a subscription standard the way that we understand it right now for Netflix. The second thing about gaming, which is also true for books, is the amount of time involved and the time's requirement. There are books that would take you, frankly, dozens of hours to read. There are games that will take you dozens of hours to play. There is almost no book that I know of that will simply take you a few minutes, like 4 or 5 minutes, unless it is a children's book, and really those are like the learning books where they have like 4 words per page. But outside of those, there are almost no there are almost no books that will take you that little bit of time. The equivalent of a song played on Spotify. And similarly, there are almost no games that would take you 4 or 5 minutes to play in the entirety from beginning to end. I'm not talking about a match, because even when you play a match in a game, you haven't beaten the game. No one plays a single game of Call of Duty and say, "Yep, I did it. I started it. I played it. I finished the match. I've beaten Call of Duty." No, it doesn't happen. That's not the way that works, because we all understand, we're all intelligent. That's not what it is. So, subscription gaming will never be the future, ever, because it is incompatible with this medium. And I know this to be true. Like, there's no if or but about it. It's true because it's true for books, and subscription for books have been around way longer than subscriptions for gaming. At least the way that we understand them in the current paradigm. So if it hasn't worked out for books yet, and it will most likely never work out for books, it will not work for games. Because if you are in a subscription service where you're paying $20 a month or something like that, to play a game that's going to take you 100 hours, and you can only put in 10 hours per week, that means that it's going to take at least 10 weeks to finish that game. That is nearly 3 months. It's 2.5 months. But now you have now put in as much time into the subscription, as much money into the subscription service, or even more, than you would have if you had just bought the game outright. You see, subscription services for games works best when those experiences are short. If you were paying, let's say that you have 40 hours in a month to play a game, and all of the games only take about 4 to 5 hours, well, that means that you're playing 8 to 10 games every month. That seems to be worth your $20. But as soon as you come up to a colossal, huge game that you're going to put 200 hours in, the longer you can technically play that game and still enjoy yourself, the worse the return on investment for the money you invested in. In fact, it's simply true. The longer a game is, the more time you will spend in that game, the better it is for you to simply pay for it outright. But again, just like we talked before, people are more attracted to the AAA bigger games than they are to the smaller indie games that they probably weren't that interested in buying. You play them because they are part of your subscription, but if you have a choice, you would rather play the big, epic, big busters, the Elden Rings, the Witcher 3s, the Cyberpunk 2077s, those games that might take you hundreds of hours and bring you hundreds of hours of enjoyment. And so, just like with books, at the end of the day, it is good that there are smaller books. It is good that we have novels that vary in size. But you take a look at some of the most influential books, especially in the fantasy space where I am currently firmly seated. You take a look at the Stormlight Archive by Brandon Sanderson, or you take a look at his Cosmere series. You take a look at so many authors in fantasy right now, and they create truly epic, just tomes. Like, these are tomes. These are volumes, that they will get you to read. Or the ever popular self-help genre, in these modern times. And again, some of these books, they are truly epic, and these are books that require you to think. So sometimes, even though a Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle or something is a fairly small book in terms of its physical volume and the word count that it has, it requires you to pause and to meditate upon its ideas, that it might actually take you way longer to finish that book and fully interact with it than finishing something like a fantasy where you are really just experiencing a story, and from time to time you'll be challenged, but you don't have to ponder upon that challenge. So it is the same with games. The fact that some of the most enjoyable experiences happen to require you to be more and more active, something like an Elden Ring really requires you to be invested in the game. You can't play it passively. And also happen to be some of the most grandiose and most lengthy of experiences simply means that it's never going to work. Subscription gaming will never be the future. It will be a part of gaming, and it is a good part. For a lot of games, it can bring them tremendous eyes and attention, and that is good. But at the end of the day, it cannot be the future. Just like subscription services for certain books can do really, really well, but it cannot be the future. And this is before we talk about financial incentives. This is simply your relationship to the subscription service. This isn't the fact that a lot of these games on the subscription services are seen as lesser than because they're a subscription game. Oh, this is a Game Pass game. This is like without taking into account that the financial incentives for these subscription services seem to get lower and lower because they seem to give less and less of a bag upfront for these games to be made and be part of the subscription service. Now we have games that are leveraging releasing on both subscription services at once. I think just in order to make ends meet, because if a person is giving you a third of what they would have offered you 5 years ago, and then the other person is giving you half of what they would have offered you 5 years ago, you might be like, hey, listen, if we combine these two, we might be able to just make it work for our finances. So there are so many reasons that we do not need to touch on, but simply your relationship with the subscription service for gaming, the paradigm under which it operates under, that in itself invalidates this lie that subscription service or subscription gaming is the future. Again, we've had gaming subscription for ages. Okay, you've been able to get something like GameFly and simply rent a game for a while. Remember when Blockbuster was around? I'm pretty sure my Blockbuster, at least down here, offered games as well. And that is a subscription gaming, But again, we are where we are. Okay? So that's it. Those were the 7 insidious lies that are going on in gaming and that I think we should stop telling ourselves. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't serve us. It doesn't behoove us to lie to ourselves. When we tell ourselves that gameplay is king, and yet games that come out with amazing gameplay but lesser than graphics, less than stellar graphics, do not sell well. When we tell ourselves that variety matters in gaming, but more people would prefer to buy a fairly mediocre or average AAA game like like an Assassin's Creed Valhalla, right? Very by the books, a very committee driven kind of game, very checkbox kind of game, both for the company and for you, then they would a Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown. We know that that's not true. When people tell themselves all of these other lies that we went through, and you see that reality disagrees over and over again, we have to start thinking like, yeah, we shouldn't lie anymore. I remember reading The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and in there was a little moment where this guy Stephen Curry, I think he's like in the military somewhere, and he's looking at the terrain. He's looking at this foreign terrain on this foreign land. He doesn't know it well. He's looking down at his map, and the terrain disagrees with the map. He looks down at his map, turns it around, tries to read it multiple times. Eventually goes up to his surgeon and he's like, hey, there's a problem. And his surgeon turns to him and he says, if the map disagrees with the terrain, then the map is wrong. And that's what I will leave you on. Because if the action of the collective, right, disagrees with the words of the collective, then the words are wrong. Don't try to change the terrain to make it look like the map. Update the map to make it look like the terrain. And that is where we'll leave it.